like we never left from Kutuda Media House, home of the Vineyard and Michaela. Live on 786 Sports, it's a Big League Show with Adrian Lorenzo. And now batting, here's Danny Enriquez.
Welcome back to El Big League Show. My name is Danny Enriquez. I am here with two-time World Series champion and former MLB exec Adrian Lorenzo. And Adrian, we usually don't do breaking news, kind of instant reacts on this show, or at least haven't yet, but got some news fresh off the presses, seismic news. The Boston Red Sox have traded Rafael Devers to the San Francisco Giants for, really the return is not the story here, but Jordan Hicks, Kyle Harrison, first-round pick James Tibbs, and minor league pitcher Kyle Bello. And it's funny, we did the whole organizational report on the Boston Red Sox early in the season. You were bullish on the health of the organization. Here they are, half a game out of the wild card, just swept the Yankees. Rafael Devers right there in the middle of their lineup, the heart of their lineup, heart of their team, really. And he's out the door. It's been a long process. I get to this point, but feels very sudden. And from the reaction I'm seeing media-wise and anonymous execs, seems like there's a lot of shock. You're in it. You got these guys on speed dial. Seems like it's one of those where even people in the game are kind of like, wow.
Yeah, I'll start with myself, and I'm shocked, and it's all happened so fast that there's no real. I'm not gonna give the indication that I'm like plugged in or getting secret information. Just giving my genuine response. Like, I'm shocked. Like, as you mentioned, I cut my teeth in the Red Sox organization, so I follow them more closely than most. And so the fact that the Boston Red Sox would make a move this bold at this point in time, when they had just won 7 of 8, kind of crawled back into the playoff race, I think squarely in a wild card position, after like struggling through the first part of the season, finally getting some momentum behind them, with Rafael Devers being the driver of that offense in this stretch here to help them win, including a home run yesterday, to hitting a home run, to beating the Yankees, to then being traded 3 hours later when you're on your way to Seattle after that, or to the West Coast trip. It's shocking, man. It's really shocking. I know that there's probably all sorts of ways to justify the trade, right? Like, from the Red Sox standpoint, this isn't there's all sorts of markers to justify why you make this move. And maybe some of this is connected to what we talked about earlier in spring training, and some just differences of opinion and position. But this is not going to be popular by any stretch of the imagination. It will be an incredibly unpopular move on the heels to Red Sox Nation of the Mookie Betts trade, which they're still not over. So to have this happen right now for an organization that is always in win now mode, you get very small windows to rebuild or regroup with the Boston Red Sox. So all of New England and all of Red Sox Nation, I think, is reeling a little bit right now. And I think if you poll the reaction on Twitter and the reaction, like, none of it's going to be real positive in the Red Sox direction. Although I think there may be some positives overall, right? Like, there's an efficiency argument, and this deal could become an albatross at some point, given the guaranteed dollars for a player that will now play defense less and less. That said, what we pay for in this game is offense, and he provides that squarely in elite levels of the league. I mean, you pull up his Baseball Savant page, and it's just red markers all the way to the right from the left side of the plate at 28 years old. So, like, this was going to be a staple in the middle of your lineup for a long time. And all of a sudden, like, that's not the case anymore. Now you're just going to rely on you're going to try to replace his production some way. So whether you can go now and get a bat at the trade deadline with more flexibility, that's a possible move. Maybe that's what's going to happen here as a follow-up. You have players coming back. You have top prospects coming up with Roman Anthony, Marcelo Meyer. Like, there are moves that will help them bridge this gap, but it's a bold move from a popularity standpoint to make this. So it takes a lot of courage to make this trade in Boston right now. And it hurts to see Red Sox, Rafael Devers go out the door. It does. I feel like He's one of the better offensive players in the game. And regardless of what spat you may have had with him in the media over positional differences, hard to believe that this is the only solution to that problem, is to just kind of have that go elsewhere. So, but I'm not in that clubhouse, right? Like, you can pull that clubhouse and maybe there's a very different reaction to this. But it's hard for me to cut this in too many ways where this is favorable short-term impact to the Red Sox. It's not. It's hard for me to make that argument right now, even though the return is not insignificant. There's quality players being transferred here to the Red Sox organization, which is already a good one. It's just, you're not going to see that uptick right now unless Jordan Hicks goes out and performs immediately to stabilize your pitching. But Kyle Harrison immediately got optioned to Worcester. So when he got on the team, so that's not a major league impact. And then you got 2 more prospects. That's a hard pill to swallow for a team in the hunt right now.
Yeah, and look, we'll talk about the Giants aspect of it as well, because they've been dying to get a bat like this, a star like this in their lineup. So huge move for San Francisco. But staying on the Red Sox for a second, just timeline-wise, you signed Devers, 10 years, $313 million, right? Thinking, I guess, he's going to be your third baseman until he grows out of it and you have value that way. You go and get Alex Bregman. So to me, that's kind of where this thing started going in this direction. So before we go to the impact of that, when you get a guy like Bregman, knowing he plays the same position as your current star, probably a better defender than your current star, how does that, like, you can't just be thinking about the immediate part of it. There's got to be a long range view of how this is going to work. So I know you're not in their shoes, but when they acquire an Alex Bregman without telling Devers, without looping him in the process, like, how does that part of it work?
Well, I think it's important. Like, it's important to note the timeline in which the Bregman acquisition even happened. So you're trying to upgrade offensively. You need runs. You need to score more runs with the Yankees doing what they're doing and the rest of your division doing what they're doing. But free agency is tricky. You don't know when you're going to come to a deal. The Bregman deal happened late. You don't know. Like, Bregman himself said that he could have been maybe in Detroit or maybe somewhere else. Like, and these decisions come down to at the last second kind of window. So you can go after Bregman, but you can't put all your eggs in that basket. So you can go in with a plan that Rafael Devers is my third baseman this year, and all of a sudden Bregman wants to go your direction. And so you think about it in some ways as a good problem, because, okay, now how do we adjust once we added this other elite bat? Because what I believe is you have to stack on any given night, the best 9 bats that you can stack that can still defensively play for you on a given night. You still have to do that every night. So the Red Sox calculation to me is like, well, would I rather have Devers or Bregman at third, or would I rather have Bregman and Devers in the same lineup and Casas in that lineup at the time before he got hurt? So you can't always bank on you getting that guy. I feel like they found themselves in a position where they got Bregman. He's a superior defender and just championship caliber player. And so they tried to make it work with Devers, but you didn't have the lead time to loop CC Devers on the Bregman free agency process. And nor can you wait as a team. Like, the process is multi-layered as is. You can't just get green lights from everybody on a thing that's happening. And like, Scott Boras is like, okay, this or this the day before. You can't like CC Devers, make sure he's okay with it positionally. Sometimes you just have to boldly strike and then worry about it after. I think in the aftermath of that, it can either be received one of 2 ways by the player, open or closed. Devers, in this particular instance, surprised by the timing. You're already ramping yourself up for spring training, and this happens. So did he take the best route by showing opposition to that? I don't think so. I think he'd rather have that one back. If I'm Rafi, like, okay, maybe doing this again, I'll handle this a little differently next time. But it was also kind of sprung on you really quickly. You weren't prepared for that, and you're a prideful dude. So you're a third baseman your whole life, your whole career. So I don't put too much stock in like, oh, he's not a team player, he didn't want to play. It's like, no, all of a sudden your dynamic shifted, and okay, maybe he didn't react perfectly, but who does react perfectly to everything? And then, as we've talked about here, there's a whole language barrier. He's telling all of this through an interpreter, and there's a certain game of telephone in that. I've been in that role. You can try to give a word for word verbatim response. You can't do that. You're like, you're trying to paraphrase and summarize. You're trying to get as close to what he's saying as possible, but the exchange is happening so fast. And I'm not saying anything was mistranslated. I just think that there's just a mistranslation that happens in both directions when you have to cross that language barrier. In this particular instance, it didn't work in Rafi's favor because he didn't get to explain in a way that's his first comfortable language what was going on or his understanding of it. So that's That's one tough checkpoint, right? Then you get past that. And then like this happens with Tristan Casas, where all of a sudden first base is now open and you're asking him to now play first base, which I think people look at first base as a throwaway position. It's not. It's not a throwaway defensive position at all.
We saw the World Series.
There you go. You can be the most consequential guy on the field in both directions. And most often it's kind of like a field goal kicker. You're expected to make it. And if you don't make it, it's a problem. And it's very public when it happens. But you'd make the play and nobody gives you exceptional credit for being a good defensive first baseman or making the normal play. But you screw it up one time and it's ugly. I mean, Bill Buckner is like, it can cost you in that way. So I don't know. I also don't blame Rafi. I think if he's a third baseman, he could definitely play first base, but it's not plug and play without you preparing for it at all. In spring, you don't have an off season to prepare. You don't have a spring to prepare. You just got to kind of roll out there. And defense can impact offense. Like if you're out there and your confidence is shot from playing poor defense, to then think you're going to all of a sudden flip the switch on and be confident to go perform at elite offensive levels, it's not that easy. And I thought he got dinged again there for not being the team guy and not switching the position. I don't think that's totally fair either. I also don't like they have a DH position. So I don't know why this first base thing came up, like to that he needed to be the gap there. And so now we arrive here to where he's traded, and I'm shocked, to be honest, because of how good he is as a hitter. Like if you as a scout just go in and watch the Red Sox, you very quickly spot Rafael Devers like, okay, that's the dude in this lineup. And you need that in this division. And he's a Yankee killer. The Yankees are the happiest people in this whole dynamic to not have to see Rafael Devers over and over again. But I think if you poll Red Sox Nation right now, they are livid at this move.
Let me ask you, we got a question from the three list, which I think is relevant, because I was going to ask about the first base thing, because that to me, that was the part where they kind of lost me. But you look at the three list here, he says, was the assumption of Devers' full contract by the Giants a major factor in the trade's feasibility? So before you answer, you sign him to this big deal.
Yep.
Now he's your DH. He's not playing any defense at all. Yep. We've seen big, burly, left-handed Dominican DHs have a pretty big impact in those colors.
Yep.
I mean, right here. So I don't, that seemed normal to me. The first base part, which was not planned, obviously, was a reaction to an injury. Was that like trying to salvage some of his fielding value and say, hey, we signed you this big deal. We want you to be a first baseman long-term because we're paying you this money. At least you're playing every day in the field. And then to Three-List's question, now that you know he's a DH and he's not going to play first, is the contract now a bit of an albatross in a certain way?
That's the only argument I could see being the most viable one. If you're on the Red Sox side of things, you're kind of getting out in front of what could be a potential albatross, but also like you're the Red Sox, right? Like to a certain extent, it kind of comes with the territory that you are the team that can absorb some of these albatrosses, because right now, what he is for you right now is one of the best top 10 bat in the league that you need right now. You went out and got Bregman because you needed more offense. You went out and got these because you needed more offense. Now all of a sudden you remove the biggest part of that offense, and maybe they feel they can survive that either way. And maybe they can, but it kind of goes against logic, at least for me, that removing Devers over the next 2 to 3 year window is the best thing for the Red Sox moving forward, unless he was polluting that clubhouse altogether, which I don't have reason to believe that was the case. But yes, the best argument is that you have now created financial flexibility for this year as well, because the Giants are taking on the entirety of the deal, which is a big, usually there's some kind of negotiation for how much they're taking on, and they'll pay percentages, but the Giants are taking on all of it. So you create theoretically space now for this year, right, to go out and acquire another bat at the deadline, which I guess they could theoretically do now. And arguably they should and will. But you're going to be scrambling to make up the production that you had in-house, at least over these next few years. Long-term, sure, it could bite you. But the Red Sox, to me, they have to think efficiently long-term, but you also have to have your eyes squarely on the present. Your fan base, your region will not allow you to put this 5 to 7 year plan in front of them, that they'll just have to kind of wait and see. This has been a rough season for a Red Sox fan. They finally got some momentum, and now like that momentum has been broken. So we'll see how they bounce back.
I want to shift to the Giants just because of the positional discussion. So, as you think about the numbers, you say, okay, well, if he's only a DH, maybe the contract's a little rich, but it doesn't have to be a third baseman for a team acquiring him, theoretically. Or sorry, it doesn't have to be a DH for the team acquiring him. He could still play third base. But then the team that acquired him has a pretty good third baseman themselves, and Chapman, I would
argue the best.
Yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere.
No.
So is now a situation where it's like you're saying he's not worth it to be a DH, where the Giants are saying we will gladly take him as just a DH at that number.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's not worth it as a DH.
I know you're not. I'm saying if they're saying that,
correct.
The Giants are saying the exact opposite because they're not even playing him at third base.
I don't think that that's the Red Sox argument, that a DH is not worth this amount of money, therefore we have to get this off our books. I don't think that's the logic. They probably feel really good about this return, and it is a sizable return. It's not some like castaway, throwaway prospects or major league impact. They are a couple, either Jordan Hicks and a real major league, like that impacts you right now. So you have, if they're viewing their pitching from a certain standpoint and they view this as stabilizing that, great. If they're pitching depth, Kyle Harrison, while he was optioned to AAA, that doesn't help the recent or the current view of this deal. But if you see him as part of your 5th, 6th starter depth here in the future, then you can make that argument. You're stabilizing your pitching with your offense outgoing. But I actually do think like bats are king right now. Whether they look like a DH or they look like a first baseman or they look like Juan Soto isn't getting paid what he's getting paid for what he does in right field. It's nice that he can go out there and stand in right field and not just be a DH. But if he was just a DH, you're really only looking at him as a bat anyway, you know? So I think that you can hold and retain that kind of value as a DH. That to me is not problematic. And for the Giants, they're viewing it that way because they do have a third baseman. If they know that they need something productive in the middle of the lineup and left-handed with power, they feel like they're getting that in spades here.
So let's talk about the return a second. Got over 20 in the chat, so get your questions into the chat. But when we focus on the return for the Red Sox, right? You got Jordan Hicks started 9 of 13 games, so he's probably, I'm guessing, going to be back to the pen roll for the Red Sox. I'm guessing that's where he's going to be more effective. He hasn't produced very well as a starter this year. Still has the great velocity, still has the great ground ball rate, but I'm guessing that's where you slot him. I don't know if you think differently on that.
I don't know. I think he fits into some kind of leverage spot for them one way or another, whether that be in a pen role, whether that be in a kind of like depth starter role. It remains to be seen, but I think they're still kind of reeling in the wake of what's happening here, you know? Yeah. So I hard to say. You make this deal knowing that he's squarely in your mix in some capacity.
Then with Harrison, somebody who has had value, been a prospect, unique arm slot, the spin rates, the velocity's been up and down, but he was slated to start, I believe, the game before he got traded. So even though he's in AAA now, you see him coming back to the majors at some point here. Tibbs is someone that I'm familiar with because he played in the ACC, played for Florida State, saw him play in person a couple times when he played at the University of Miami. That's an interesting one to me because I looked at the draft. It's amazing. So 12th pick, Braden Montgomery traded for Garrett Crochet, now part of the same organization, right? 12th pick. 13th pick is Tibbs, left-handed hitter, really a left field only kind of profile, not much defense going on there, but a bat getting drafted 13th to, at that time, the Giants. Next pick, Cam Smith, goes to the Cubs. He's traded for Kyle Tucker rental. He's already in the major leagues making plays, producing for the Astros. So it's a very interesting little pocket of college hitters there because 2 of them now are in the Red Sox organization. But if you're the Red Sox, I'm thinking, man, the guy I wish we had was Smith. You got 3 guys in the same pocket, and we don't get the guy that's in the majors. We got a guy that's a lefty who's in high A right now, hitting well, but high A guy that's not going to be playing in the middle of the diamond. Montgomery, we'll see. He's been hurt. It's not like a sparkling prospect return. So you really need those major leaguers to do their thing.
Yeah, this doesn't feel like a win now move. Like what gives me the best 2025 team, unless you have things in mind or feel confident you can make some moves in the short term, because the deadline is still available to you. The same way they made this trade, they can make other moves.
And by the way, I should correct myself. Montgomery was drafted by the Red Sox, then goes out for Crochet.
Correct.
But they had a chance to get the other 2, the guy they just traded Devers for, and the guy that's been the best of the three to this point.
Sure.
So it's just an interesting pocket there. But I wanted to correct myself. Montgomery, drafted by the Red Sox, goes out to the White Sox for a crochet.
And I like Tibbs. I like the return. I don't love it for what it means for your immediate future. So you have to get into the mindset of like, this is better for me in the future if you're in the Red Sox side of things than right now, unless there's something that we don't know about that's polluting it's keeping you from being the team you want to be in this season as well. I don't have any reason to believe that's the case, but that's kind of the only thing that makes it make sense. There's an emotional kind of subjective identification that the team may be better off parting ways from this drama, this like perceived toxicity to the club. I still think you keep the best player on the field possible. And I think you're the Red Sox. You operate at the top of this financially. Like you should be able to absorb a contract like this. But there's components of this that none of us will ever know. And this one's tricky. I'm trying to I tried different ways to see how this could make the most sense right in the middle of a playoff run. And it's a hard one for me because it feels like you're bolstering your farm system even further. It was one of the best systems in baseball already. So I do think what they got, Harrison, Tibbs, Bello, I think these guys they could turn out to, like these trades get evaluated in waves. Immediate impact, a couple of years later, 4 or 5 years later, those players could be stars later, but you have to hope that your fan base gives you that time between now and then. Chaim Bloom didn't survive the Mookie Betts ordeal, right? Like, because the Red Sox weren't good enough in a short amount of time to make that deal make sense to Red Sox Nation long-term. I hope that that's not the case here for Craig Breslow, but the heat is on.
Yeah. And with Devers, better than me about kind of the behind the scenes stuff. I had never heard, at least on the outside, that this was like a mercurial type of guy, like a Manny Ramirez, where he had some sort, or Hanley Ramirez, right? Where he had a reputation surrounding him. Seems like this is something that's come up through the series of events that we just talked about. I'm not saying there's no history. I don't know, but it seems like the whole thing with Bregman and this episode is what caused some of his quote unquote makeup issues or whatever you want to call it. Because I had not heard anything until this all came up.
Right. I mean, it's hard to separate that from the outcome that's happened now. I think it'll be perhaps from the Red Sox point of view, it's like, hey, it's more complicated than that. There's more layers to this than that. So it really leaves, and because it doesn't really square as a baseball win now move, I think you've seen some executives poll and they're kind of head scratching. I think the industry's kind of head scratching a little bit. So there isn't this obvious, well, this is a great baseball trade, 1-for-1. You can see in the absence of that, and you have the spring training drama and the first base positional stuff like there, it's just easier to grab on and say like, how could these two things not be connected? And maybe they are, but I'd venture to say there's more going on here. These things, like Craig Breslow doesn't just operate in a vacuum based on pure emotion and subjectivity. These things get run by ownership. There's all sorts of checkpoints to greenlight this. I would very much imagine like this isn't one guy operating rogue on his own. This is an organization deciding for one reason or another, we're going in this direction, and it is away from Rafael Devers in this case. But we are aligned behind this. So this isn't a Craig Breslow move. This is a Red Sox front office move, no matter how you cut it.
I'm glad you brought that up. And we got a question from the three list that I think sets up the question I'm about to ask, which is he's asking how this trade aligns with the Red Sox long-term strategy for the franchise, or are they fully rebuilding? I've seen speculation from just like fans on Twitter. Bill Simmons did something where, they also own Liverpool, I guess a soccer team, and they just had a big signing today. So there's people saying, are they using money, saving money on this end and using it for their other endeavors? I'm not sure that's the case. Of course, you have Bregman potentially opting out, Boris Client. Who knows how that whole thing is going to be? I'd imagine he's probably more expensive than the $30 million a year. Yeah, possibly more expensive. So how do you see this playing out going forward with, just at a minimum, the money you saved? Is this part of a rebuild and you pocket that money, or is that money going to get reallocated pretty quick, you think?
I feel like the Red Sox operate at such a high level. I mean, we're talking about the biggest business in the world, like billions of dollars, hundreds of, this is the highest level operation you, as a sports ownership group, owning Liverpool, the different hockey organizations. Like this is the highest level game happening. So I don't believe that the $30 million owed to Rafael Devers or whatever that exact number is significantly like allowing them to do something or prohibiting them from doing something. I think this is bigger business than that. I'm sure there's an argument that could be made about future flexibility. I just don't think the Red Sox are the ones that need to make it. So Alex Bregman's deal, these deals very often with the opt-outs and the player options very often end with the player declining those options. So you have to look at it as a 1-year deal, even if it's 3 potentially. Because if he has a good year, he's going to opt out of that, and he's having a good year, and he's probably going to continue to have a pretty good year. And likely in line for another version of this deal, a 2 to 3 year deal where he could guarantee himself more money. So it's not a given that he's there to build with you long-term, unless behind the scenes, you have an extension that you could line up with him, which again, we can't know these things and we won't know these things. Scott Boras player, so extensions are unlikely overall. But this one's tricky for me. I think you're the Red Sox. You need impact players. You're going to try to acquire another Rafael Devers at the deadline if you need to, or a player of that caliber. They might feel really bullish on the prospects that they have coming up as well. They might feel, with Yoshida coming back, they might be in another, they might be better in the long run, or at least be able to make up a percentage of the difference that you have with Devers outgoing. So I just know that they have to pay attention to the now. They're not an organization that could just punt on that. Like the Miami Marlins can punt on right now, and your fans just kind of got to deal with it. That's a tougher pill to swallow for Red Sox Nation. They don't want to do. They'd argue they've been doing that for 3 to 4 years now. So tough. And actually, I know I was on the same major league staff as Craig Breslow. Like I was on the major league staff as an employee, and Craig was a reliever on that Red Sox team, and he was the players union rep. One of the sharpest guys in baseball, period, full stop. Not just because he went to Yale, though he also went to Yale. Just like spend any amount of time talking to him. This is one of the sharper guys in all of baseball. This isn't like nobody's pulling the wool over anybody's eyes here. So if they're making this deal, they're making it because they have significant reason and I don't know, evidence and arguments to back that reason. You could disagree with that, and I think fans will, because fans are more emotional. But I have to believe like they feel like they're gaining overall by making this deal. It's too risky on the other end to not feel that way.
And they just open the door to everybody, right? With that documentary. So the timing is interesting. You got a huge spotlight kind of on your front office. And then something like this. You can't be a bigger fan of Roman Anthony, Marcelo Meyer, all those guys than they are right now, because if those guys really start rolling, Anthony's off to a little bit of a slow start, nothing to get scared about. But if those guys heat up and Roman Anthony looks like a Bryce Harper Jr. and Mayer's doing this thing, now this is a distraction. Now we're feeling good about this.
Right.
But if those guys are struggling, and I mean, they're learning the game, you can't expect them to save a franchise with their experience level. That's tough, man. That's a tough position, I think, for those guys, because if they're on fire, we're not going to think about this. We're going to talk about them. And if they're not, it's going to be a little negative.
And like, not to disrespect the rest of that Red Sox lineup. Like one player doesn't make an entire team or an entire lineup. Like we've seen this. Shohei Ohtani was playing for the Angels with Mike Trout for a long time. These things don't get one on paper. They get one on the field. So on the one hand, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here, but I think if you're a player 1 through 9 in that Red Sox lineup, you're like, this Rafi's not here anymore. But like we got a bunch of elite level major league hitters, right? That like now those guys all need to have career years in order to make up this gap. Or you supplement with another big bat here that maybe fits better. But I think the players on that team, there's a deflating moment, but you have a good performance from a few guys tonight and tomorrow, and that can help, soothe the pain. And then, then you got to play them now. I think the Giants are coming back into town within the next 10 days or something. And I have a feeling Rafael Devers is about to go off for San Francisco now. So that may be tough to watch, but I don't count the Red Sox out even with this. So I think they would dispute the fact that this is not a win now acquisition for them, especially because we don't know what they're about to do at the deadline. Maybe they don't project this team to be the team that wins in this year. Maybe they see the gaps between themselves and the Yankees or any other team. That said, you don't sign deals like Walker Buehler and Alex Bregman thinking that you're a long-term 3 years out team. Those deals are signed to be won this year. So there's like kind of mixed messaging happening here on that front, in my opinion.
And Bregman coming back potentially before the All-Star break, so that helps soothe the pain as well. I'm sure they're hoping that they need Roman Anthony's sister to go on TV again and go viral. Anything to talk about besides besides the negativity that they're getting right now. Other side of the trade, we talked so much about Boston, but there's another pretty blue blood franchise involved here, a 3-time world champion team that has been begging for a player like this in the San Francisco Giants. And it's amazing when you look at the Giants, they have not won, or so they've not had a player hit 30 home runs since 2004. Since Barry Bonds.
Wow.
I couldn't believe that stat when I read it. I double check, and that's over 21 years. So you look at the pursuit of Aaron Judge, right? That was pretty well documented. The pursuit of Shohei Ohtani, which the fit made sense, but didn't happen for a variety of reasons. Carlos Correa, that one got pretty close to the finish line, if I recall. So you're trying to get a player like that to get back to that 3 World Series run you had in pretty recent memory. Again, not that much different in recent history than the Boston Red Sox as far as prestige. We're talking so much about the Red Sox. There's a big franchise here that has been begging for a player like this. 10 games over 500. The division is absolutely smoking. You got the Dodgers, the Padres. That's going to be a hell of a game tonight with Dodgers and the Padres rivalry. Diamondbacks, bad injury news, but they still got excellent players. Rockies, doormat there. Very interesting division. Very interesting team in that division now that they've got that bat that they've really needed.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to the San Francisco Giants for making this deal, right? For all sorts of reasons and all sorts of things in their process. But I think a lot of executives wouldn't have assumed that this deal was available, right? Like you maybe like this feels to me like the Giants pursue a player that they love. They see the window creak open a little bit. There's some drama in the offseason. There's like this opportunity to access this player, and they hit the hole hard and like got to a deal that, in my opinion, they probably pushed the pace on, right? They probably engaged. They probably like locked in and like saw enough of a window of opportunity, like the player, have an assessment on the player that makes you feel this is the missing piece to us making a push in this division. And they aggressively went out and got that player, but you have the major league pieces to make the deal happen. So you have the prospect depth, you have the major league pieces, and you have the near kind of Kyle Harrison in that in between. Like it's a major league ready player knocking on the door, but kind of prospect. So it's like a tiered return here that they're giving. So they have the depth themselves to make that deal, the assets to make it, but then also the financial flexibility on your end. Like you as the San Francisco Giants are saying that you can absorb this Rafael Devers money, and the Red Sox potentially saying they cannot. And those are two, like, you wouldn't slot the Giants above the Red Sox in terms of overall value of an organization or free agency dollars spent. So I think Buster Posey and the rest of his group, especially the pro scouting group, and like shout out to them for aggressively going after the player that they wanted, right? Like they locked in on a player. And to me, it's the only way you get it done. You knock on the Red Sox door, you call them enough to be like, okay, well, maybe the door's open just enough to be able to do this. Most surprising because, like I said, Devers has been the engine of this run here. They've gotten themselves back in the race. Maybe 2 weeks ago, it was looking pretty grim for Red Sox fans overall because the gap in the division was widening. The wild card started to get out of reach, but a hot stretch gets you right back into it. But I think, the Buster Posey move to be the president of baseball operations was maybe not a correction to this analytical age that we're in, but a kind of a balancing to this pivot hard in the direction of analytics and only analytics. I'm not going to say the Giants aren't making analytically driven decisions or haven't great analytical information, but the Buster Posey hire overall away from a Farhan Zaidi, which would have been considered on the other side of that, Oakland A's, Dodgers, like analytically driven decisions, they corrected to this Buster Posey model that's more the player is at the center of it, and the player is a former player. He's an executive now, president of baseball ops. And from everything I've heard, a really good one, but it's a different approach. We saw this with the Astros. They flipped, in their front office philosophy with their new general manager that came from the Brave side of things, more of a scouting entrenched philosophy. And maybe Buster Posey, a little more like kind of major league player development focused general manager or president of baseball ops. And I don't know that I don't like that trend. I don't know that we weren't correcting too hard or pivoting too hard in the direction of analytics before this. So like, again, I have to tip my hat to the San Francisco Giants for having had a 30 home run hitter in your park for a long time. Rafael Devers is a good bet to be that and more. Not only is he a homer machine, he's an extra base hit machine, and he's just a force in the middle of your lineup. And so they're in a run in probably the toughest division in baseball in that NL West right now. And they made the splash to make their team better. It's kind of juxtaposing how the Giants fans feel about their team right now versus how the Red Sox fans feel about their teams. I think you'd find those on opposite ends of the spectrum right now.
Over 26 on the live chat. Remember, like and subscribe. Get your questions in. Players on both sides of the transaction, right? Because you got the Red Sox. That's a player-driven front office as well, right? I mean, two major leaguers making a deal.
That's true.
Really interesting move. We could talk about that all day. There's other stuff going on, but man, I'm fascinated to watch. Honestly, the Giants, I'm fired up to watch. This is a proud franchise. Like we mentioned, 3 World Series in the last 2 decades, and they've had the defense. They've had, they have a lot going for them, but this is the piece that they really needed. Do you think they can make a run here at the National League pennant? I mean, there's some heavy hitters in there, obviously, right there in their division, but do they have enough with the way they play defense, with the way they kind of grind out these wins? Now they have a little more juice and a little more horsepower. Can they do it?
I mean, they've been doing it. They've probably been one of the more overachieving, overperforming teams if you just grade a lineup out on paper, but they do a lot of things well. We've talked about, center field play that they've gotten, like they have really solid pieces across the board. I think this, I don't know if it puts them over the top, but it puts you into toe-to-toe mode with with the Dodgers and with the Padres, which you need to be like facing those lineups. So I think it's a realistic, okay, we're in this lineup, we're in this division, this big boy division. We need to like step this up overall, and they have. So it's a performing team that just added a star bat that's hot right now. So like it's a nice shot of adrenaline for a team that's already going pretty good. I think it puts them into, I don't think you really want to see the Giants in a playoff series right now, especially not in a wild card series. It's a tough matchup, but so is San Diego, so is LA. So it's just good baseball overall. But I think I like baseball better when the Red Sox are an elite team in baseball, and this one doesn't make me feel as strongly about that. It doesn't move the needle for the Red Sox the way it does for the Giants, and so.
Well, look, we're talking about one Florida State catcher here with Buster Posey. How about another one? Cal Raleigh. I mean, wow. The numbers he's putting up as a catcher. You said it here. We talked pre-show. Second highest WAR in all of baseball, 3rd best offensive player, 22nd best defensive player, which I did not appreciate the impact he's had on that side of the ball. Again, we talked about a lot of Florida State guys, between Posey, James Tibbs, 3rd round pick out of Florida State in 2018. I went back and watched him because I don't remember him really that much in college. I went back and looked at his college stats. His sophomore year, he hit 227 in the ACC, 227. And that, from just reading some of the scouting reports from that time, even though he rebounded as a junior and had the body, had the switch hit ability, had the power, the ability to get on base, the ability to make contact, that dropped him down. And those fears from that sophomore year apparently were a big anchor on his draft stock. But you see that OBP continue to climb. I know you're not a batting average guy, but that's also continued to climb. Just everything else has climbed. And then the power, which has been the attraction with him since he was in college, that's gone along with it as well.
Yeah, I thought we were way overdue in talking about Cal Raleigh. He kind of, I think because he's in Seattle, he just kind of get lost a little bit, but he is the 2nd highest WAR in all of baseball, trailing only Aaron Judge. And it's a all over the field contribution from arguably the most important defensive position on the field. Switch hit, just a WAR monster, right? Like this is what you would hope in a best case scenario you have as a catcher, as a franchise catcher. I mean, and doing it switch hit, so you're always on the favorable side of the pitcher split. Receiving in the 85th percentile. You just pulling his Baseball Savant page up here. This is a lot of red here, but batting run value in the 99th percentile, with catcher framing shows up again, right? Like in this era, we're still in the pre-ABS automatic balls and strikes, to where you getting strikes on the margins, which is what Cal Raleigh does, even if the other defensive numbers are less than spectacular. I think it goes to show that he gets high overall defensive ratings, despite a lot of these metrics, the blocks above average being well below average, caught stealing below average, pop time below average, sprint speed below average, but he's 85th in framing, right? Or in pitcher, right? I call it receiving more than framing. And I think it goes to show like how much this moves the needle pitch to pitch in today's baseball. I think a lot of old school catchers and people, like, they don't like that argument, right? They don't like that this has become a game of deceiving the umpire, but it's really more of like keeping strikes and getting calls on the margins to flip count leverages from, you go in an 0-0 count, you go from 0-1 to 1-0. If you look at the percentage shifts after that, like an at-bat can go drastically different by a small margin that a catcher presents a pitch with. So he does that, and then just kind of really bringing it with the offense this year. 26 homers, a 990 OPS, and just doing damage from both sides of the plate. So this is what you would draw. This is what you would draw up if you're trying to shore up your organization or build like a cornerstone piece. Like this is what it would look like. And kudos to Cal Raleigh for being that for the Mariners this year. I think it's what the Orioles hoped Adley Rutschman would be, right? Like when you come across an elite catcher that impacts the game on both sides. This is why these guys stack up WAR the way that they do, the catcher position in particular. And it's, again, third round, 90th pick overall in his draft, hit 220 whatever in his sophomore year in Florida State. Like, these things shift, these things evolve, these situations develop. Like, we do not have this figured out completely yet. Like, this is an advanced college player at a big ACC program. Gets 89 players get selected over him in the draft. I think most of those 89 selections might want to have that pick back if we redraft it again this year, right? You wouldn't see too many guys getting selected above Cal Raleigh now. And again, that's not a high school player that we had limited information on, somebody in the ACC. So as recently as 2018, we don't have the scouting thing figured out. And I think Cal Raleigh is just another example of that.
Yeah, shout out to J24 in the comments pointing out that Raleigh leading the league in defensive runs above average. And just kind of following the stat progression, the OBP really catches my attention. Starting, 2023, he was already a good player in 2023, but 306 OBP. Last year, 312 OBP. Had the power. I mean, hit over 30 home runs both seasons. But then 2025, this year, 374 OBP, and the power's gone crazy as he is improved overall as a hitter. 6'2", 235 pounds. Let's start there because I know you've, and we got a question for J24 we're going to get to in a second. But before we get to that, you scout a bunch of catchers international. I know you're more on the international side than the amateur side in terms of background, although you've seen it all, done it all. That's a pretty big dude, right? Yep. I mean, 200 is a good catcher size for an amateur, right? And then you're talking about guys 235. How does that kind of play into the evaluation?
Big time. You really have to evaluate the player in and out of the squat position. So like there are guys that are bigger guys that just move in a different way behind the plate, that they don't have to be this athletic, explosive twitch monster to be able to out-athlete the position. There are guys that are particularly athletic for their individual positions. Yadier Molina was not a traditional, you wouldn't draw it up as like, oh, that's the most athletic guy on the field, but he got behind the dish and he moved athletically. Really, all the Molinas had this, remember Jose Molina was like not a looker, but he moved. He had flexibility in his lower half and hips and stuff enough to move correctly behind the dish. And I think you can be a bigger bodied guy behind the dish and move well and block pitches well. And there's a certain physicality that needs to come with you catching 125 games a year, right? Because that's what that's like an everyday catcher is not catching 162. He's catching 120 something. That position demand takes a physical toll. So you kind of need some physicality to get through the position. So you need it, but also like sometimes with that kind of physicality comes lack of mobility, slower twitch. I think Cal Raleigh's been able to work around that, or just be more athletic than his body dimensions give him credit for.
It's almost like a center in football. There's a certain hip flexibility for a bigger guy that you have to have at that particular position. J24 asking about just adjustments in Cal's swing mechanics or swing decisions, plate discipline. I mean, certainly when you look at the stats, just going from one year to the next on the Savant. I mean, his chase percentage, 34 and 22, 30 and 23, 24, 22. Now here in 25, you're up a little bit, but you're still at 40%. So it seems like he's just getting the bat on the ball a lot better than he has in the past. And then of course the walk rate itself, starting off in the deep blue territory, and it's climbed up to one of the best walk percentages in baseball.
I think you're gonna get sick of me saying swing decisions over and over, but I think this is what stands out to me. You say like a spike in on base percentage. I'm saying he's making better swing decisions and accessing the power he already had. Whereas when you're young in the league, you're making worse swing decisions because you don't know the league. To me, this is a guy learning, evolving, and developing at the big league level to make better swing decisions to access what was already above average plus power, right? So now you combine the better swing decisions, which can produce more walks. What you're seeing here is an uptick in his ability to draw base on balls, right? I think that if you deduce that further, you're making better swing decisions earlier in counts to not chase as many pitches, right? And just kind of leverage the pitches that you do damage against the most and act on those aggressively and put good swings on those. That's what I'm seeing more than some big mechanical shift in happening. To me, he's developing between the ears mostly and approach-wise as a major league hitter. He's maturing as a major league hitter, having now been in the big leagues a little bit longer. And when guys hit that swing decision, I don't want to say threshold, but a place where they're making good decisions at the plate. Like, pitchers aren't perfect. They make mistakes all the time. And if you can capitalize on mistakes of pitchers and not further dig your own hole by making bad swing decisions, you can end up with some pretty good outcomes. And I think that's what's happening for Cal Raleigh here. I also think that catchers can shortcut this development track because they're thinking about hitters all the time. They're reading swings all the time. I think catchers have the ability to, like, they're more involved in the pitch to pitch and like evaluating swing decisions and knowing when a guy didn't make a good swing decision because my pitcher didn't execute this pitch and he chased my pitch. Or whatever he's seeing that and receiving that on his end. Yeah. So I think catchers are in a better position to apply those swing decision developments. And I think that's what we're seeing here.
That's interesting. I never thought about that the catcher's involved in every pitch decision. So why wouldn't he have more insight on the swing decision? Again, I've not thought about that. That's
harder to do than, like, easier said than done kind of thing. You have to actually execute on that. But the catcher is in a unique advanced scouting position where he's reading what's happening to the rest of the league or the kind of swings the rest of the league is taking. And to me, swing decisions are unlocking a ceiling for this player.
Switching gears to another switch hitting catcher with a lot of similarities to Cal, but key differences as well. And that's Caden Bodine from Coastal Carolina. 25 wins in a row for Coastal Carolina. One of the favorites to potentially win it all in Omaha. Really, really fun team to watch. And this is the star of the show with Caden Bodine. But man, switch hitter, like we said, I thought he was a big bodied catcher just looking at him. And you look at the stats, he's 200 pounds, which that's for an amateur, that's good size, right? I mean, Raleigh's going to be on the extreme end at 235, but clearly has more weight on him than Bodine. Look at Bodine's stats, the bat to ball, outstanding. The overall hitting, outstanding. Not as much power as Raleigh. 5 home runs this year, 9 last year. So that'd be a key difference in the profile. But when you look at what this guy does in the zone, this is according to Baseball America. I could not believe this when I read it. Of the more than 200 pitches Bodine swung at in the strike zone this year, he swung and missed just 8 times, according to Synergy Sports. I mean, insane ability to put the bat on the ball. They got a 60 grade on the hit there. Defense is there. Plus, 55 field, 55 arm, according to Baseball America. And of course, he's produced at the college level. So a guy like this, where it's almost the reverse of Bodine, you're saying, all right, the reverse of Cal, where you say he's got the power. If the hit catches up, this guy's going to be a monster. With Bodine, you're saying he's got the hit. Now, can we get more power out of him?
Sure.
So how do you assess a guy like Bodine?
I think he will be an attractive entity at the draft, especially because if you look at Coastal Carolina, and this is no disrespect to the rest of their team, but I can see how a team overperforms with a player like Caden Bodine as their kind of like key cornerstone piece, like a double contributor, somebody's contributing at a high level defensively, offensively, and navigating your pitching staff too. That's why if you did fantasy drafts from a GM perspective and you had some of the best catchers out there available, you might, Bobby Witt might go first, like Otani, like these elite bats, but then you'd go to like, if there's an elite catcher that's stacking up value all over the field, what that does to your overall outlook, especially from your pitchers and stuff.
Let me ask you about this, because this is something I've always wondered. WAR is obviously a great innovation.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me, just looking at it, I expect catchers to be higher than they are sometimes in terms of the WAR. You look at some players that have been part of a lot of winning, and their WAR is good, but it's not like outstanding. Raleigh, of course, with the way he's hitting is an exception, but a lot of times it seems like it almost underrepresents how important catchers are. And then when you look at some of the great teams, we talked about Buster Posey in that dynasty. He was the best player, one of the best players. It seems, aside from the Astros, right, who got by with other players and good defensive catcher, it seems like the truly great baseball teams of the last, at least in my lifetime, the catcher is one of the best players on the team, not just serviceable, but one of the best players on a team with a lot of good players. Do you think there's a kind of intangible value to having your catcher be one of your legitimate best players on the team?
I think absolutely. I don't think it's a non-negotiable. And I think that guys could be defensive pitcher handler specialists and still contribute. You don't need to be a total contribution player, but I think the catching position is valued by any team that's winning. Like we talk about the Dodgers, and we talk about a lot of different players. An incredibly stable piece for them has been this Will Smith, and even before he got released or let go, Austin Barnes. That was a pretty stable part of their run. And even the Astros kept signing Martin Maldonado back in these like small deals because of how they valued what he did. So even teams that are more analytically driven, still you can't get around valuing this position because it affects every pitch on both sides of the ball. Like at least when you're on defense, you're impacting pitchers, you're guiding pitchers, you're also preparing with your starting pitcher. You have an advance meeting on that day, like the starting catcher, the pitcher, your pitching coach, and he's in that. So he's in the mix on everything. And he's also kind of has to be an armchair psychologist for your pitching staff, a confidence booster for your pitching staff, keeping a pitcher on track, right? Like sometimes they're calling the game. So game calling is a whole other component to this that you can be really, you can move the needle a lot if a pitcher believes in you as a game caller. I've seen that said countless times, right? Sandy Leon, I don't know if you remember that name, but Sandy Leon was Chris Sale's go-to. Like he had to be catching when Chris Sale was pitching, and it was no disrespect to Christian Vasquez, who was exceptional himself, but a pitcher can get into a place where he believes that that's the guy guiding me through the game, and it's because of this guidance that I can be at my best. And so to answer your question, the value of this catcher position is tremendous. And I think it goes higher the more the more wins and the more the team is a winning team, the more they appreciate the value of truly good, impactful catching. And then if that guy is also producing offensively, then you're cooking with gas. That's a cornerstone player for your franchise. But,
like the multiple time champions. You had obviously Posada with the Yankees,
Varitek with the Red Sox,
Posey with the
Posey's
Giants.
A great one.
I mean, you cannot separate him from their continued success. So you mentioned Will Smith as well.
with the Cardinals.
Molina with the Cardinals. That's
another elite one. And I think that there's a theme here. Now you don't have to build it that way, but I think if you ask the pitching coach, especially, or if you ask a manager, like they're gonna point to that catcher as an extension of them as a staff. Hard to have young players in that position too, because it's a lot of expectations for a young player. So if you have a young catcher, you usually see a tandem with a more seasoned veteran guy. And a lot of those guys end up staying. I remember Jeff Mathis, for example, had jobs for his entire career because he had in spades the pitch calling, the defense. So like you need it in some capacity, and it's valued extremely highly Sometimes overvalued, I think, but it's kind of hard with the names we just listed not to feel like that's a big part of all these. And go to any major dynasty or important organization, they probably have stability at the catcher position.
Well, obviously I'm a Marlins fan, so I always think of things in terms of the Marlins.
Yep.
If you really, the narrative about the early 2000s Marlins is there was a quick fire sale after you won that 2003 championship, but that's actually not true. If you look at the 2004 Marlins, there are in many ways, at least to start the season, more talented or as talented as the team that they replaced. Now you lose Derek Lee, which ended up being a much better player on other teams than he was for us. But you had Cabrera blowing up. You had AJ Burnett coming back. You had Pavano really jumping to another level. There was a lot of talent on that team, but the loss of a Pudge, even in his diminished state, it seemed like it was more than just the production you got. It was like the confidence that he put into the whole team, right? Is there something to that? Just you get a little pep in your step and some confidence when you know the guy that's really controlling the game is someone that you trust wholeheartedly.
I'm going to shamelessly plug Legends of Dade and Giancarlo in this because we've now had two people that were within that clubhouse. So Mike Lowell, I asked him what was different about this 03 team, and he said Pudge. He didn't even hesitate. He's like, Pudge just brought a different level of accountability of everything. And so that's a guy in it that has won elsewhere, identifying that as a major key piece. And I think even Mike Lowell, to his Red Sox championships, will point to Veritek in a lot of these ways as well. But then we asked, to shout out Juice Tandrone, who was the, longtime barber for the Marlins that was around during that time. We asked him what was different about that 2003 season. He didn't even hesitate. He said Pudge, and he listed and elaborated why. Just a different presence, a different something. So I think it's yes, this position is most well positioned to impact like a clubhouse at large. And when you come across it, you realize just how important. And Pudge, it's a Hall of Fame presence, a Hall of Fame entity. And so I think that 2003 Marlins example is a really appropriate one to spotlight the importance of the catcher position for sure.
Going back to Bodine here from J24, noting that Bodine's allowed the fewest stolen base attempts in the Sun Belt Conference games on top of what he does with the bat. So really an interesting player. And I don't know if you've had a chance to just see the swing and everything else, but again, I kind of go into what we talked about. Like, and this is how you started the conversation. He's the best player on the team. And if you look at that team and you look at some of the SEC teams that they are outperforming player for player, and Coastal Carolina is a great program, is championship program. They're a real deal program, but top to bottom, the talent is not what you see with these SEC teams. And yet 25 wins in a row. And here we are June 16th and they haven't stopped winning.
I mean, just along this catcher theme, I don't know that they're overperforming because of Caden Bodine, but he's there as one of their best players. I also think people should pay attention more to the Team USA selections. Really in all of this, I think Team USA had this evaluation correct. They identified him as last summer he was playing for them. And I think if you really want to put stock into something, put stock into who Team USA selects to be their primary guys. 'Cause I think they do a really good job of like isolating, like they have the selection of the best players in the country to want to play for Team USA. But then the guys that end up playing on those teams, like the backups of the backups of the backups on all these teams, all these Team USAs are who's of guys impacting the big leagues right now. Like Caden Bodine and Danny Cuvée was on Team USA from the University of Miami. Like Team USA is a really good operation and organization, especially from a projecting out of what's going to happen here. I think in the draft room, it comes up all the time. How did he do? Oh, he was on Team USA. Okay. Check that. Like, that's a good thing to mark. And like, how did he do on Team USA? Where was he hitting on Team USA? Because those teams end up being stacked.
Yeah. I'm curious who's going to be the catcher.
High school and college level.
By the way, if we're projecting forward to the big Team USA, which is the World Baseball Classic, I know we're going to talk a lot about that in the buildup.
Yeah, I can't wait.
I mean, I kind of had Adley Rutschman circled.
Yep.
Right. Underlined. Is Cal Raleigh the guy that's going to start a catcher for the Team USA?
You'd have a more uphill battle making an argument for Adley Rutschman today than for Cal Raleigh, but you also can make the argument that you could have both. And that's where Team USA gets really dangerous, right? Because you could have both. And maybe it's somebody else. Maybe it's Will Smith.
Yeah.
Like, all due respect to Adley Rutschman. He's one of the highest scouting reports I've ever filled out as an evaluator. But like, Will Smith is a dude in the middle of that, in the middle of that Dodgers success. And so, like, shouldn't he get the hat tip, right? But I think Cal Raleigh makes a compelling case this year.
Yeah, it'll be fun to follow here. Two guys that we know are going to be in the WBC, and they're going to probably be the two guys on the poster. How fun's that going to be with these two both participating? I'm picturing like a old boxing or professional wrestling poster with both guys kind of standing toe to toe. Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani. When you put the rundown, they're still ridiculous. I think that's all you could really say. But I want to focus on a couple specific things with Ohtani. We're recording this on Monday live. He's pitching tonight, right? The word is it's probably going to be an opener situation. Rotation's been decimated by injury again. I don't know if that's something, obviously the Dodgers, detail-oriented, extremely analytical franchise. I'm sure they're wondering what the heck is going on with all these pitcher injuries. Not something that's exclusive to the Dodgers, but man, a lot of them. But now you have an ace-level pitcher who happens to be a 50-50 offensive player, your best offensive player by far, and a team of great offensive players. How do you use a Shohei Ohtani for this Dodgers team?
I don't know. I'm sure they've had all sorts of discussions. I've talked at length here about how much I respect the way the Dodgers go about everything. And I think if I could grab onto the pitcher injury stuff for a thing before getting into Shohei, because they're connected, like the Dodgers are the most respected organization in all of baseball from a processes standpoint, money. They don't have a shortage of resources, a shortage of smart people. And they are being hit by this injury thing harder than anybody. It's not because they're not researching medical items well. It's not because they're not rehabbing well. It's not because they're not strength and conditioning well. This pitcher injury thing is like, I don't know. I watched good organizations spend a lot of time trying to figure this out, be conservative with guys, be not conservative with guys, throw them, hold them, inhibit, let them go, more long toss, less. We don't have this figured out at all. I think Jeff Passan wrote The Arm, and went through this whole try to make it a science, but it basically end up at like, we don't know. Like, I don't know if we're reaching the limits of a human being's ligament with how hard things are, or how hard, how much. Is it volume? Is it intensity? Is it both? Really weird time, especially to be a pitcher. You almost, when you draft a pitcher, you acquire a pitcher, you're pretty much putting it in your head that you're going to deal with at least one Tommy John injury. That's brutal. That's where I hope, like, in this AI age, that we figure out Tommy John and pitcher injuries, because it sucks. It sucks to have this many guys be like out so regularly. And it's not just Tommy John, it's shoulder, it's lat, it's this and that. But if the Dodgers can't figure it out, like, we as an industry, it's clear that nobody has this figured out. So that's one thing.
Before we get off that, because, you hear the old timers talk about they take pride in their durability and protecting their own arms, and they'll respond to questions maybe about their velocity by saying, yeah, well, look how many times I showed up and pitched. I didn't have to sit out. Old timers. Obviously the game has changed, but man, look at the Dodgers. One thing about their rotation, do they have any non, high octane throwers? I mean, it seems like everybody in their rotation is on the higher end of the velocity spectrum, I think. I mean, am I missing anybody? I mean, between Glasnow, all the Japanese pitchers throw, incredibly hard. They've had some guys that are just flamethrowers. Walker Buehler, when they had him. Yeah. I mean, it's not like they have a lot of guys that fit the old Jamie Moyer profile. They're all hard throwers. So is that maybe why they're getting hit by this more?
I don't think so. I think that they properly value velocity. I don't think they overvalue velocity. I think very rare for you to see somebody in the Red Sox, in the Dodgers pitching group that doesn't also have underlying quality stuff. Like, they're not velo chasers and that's it. Let that play. I think if it's velocity with good movement and with enough command, they know that plays. And therefore, if you have your choice of a guy of two guys and they both have equal movement, you're going to pick the one with more velocity. So I think that they get to select from the cream of the crop, and therefore a lot of times that looks like higher velocity. So I think they value it, but they value it appropriately. They're not just you're not looking at guys on there that just throw hard with terrible underlying features, whether it be spin, movement. Like, they properly value total, like the total pitch, velocity and movement. So I don't think it's that they're chasing velocity. I think they're also chasing velocity.
Okay.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's not. I wouldn't just characterize them as like a flame-throwing bullpen. They throw really hard out of their bullpen, but the stuff profiles in those bullpens, and of all those guys hurt, all those guys have borderline elite stuff profiles.
And we'll see now with Ohtani here as he pitches to what a game. I mean, against the Padres.
They're in first place. They're in first place, and they have this many injuries.
Well,
So,
they have Freddie Freeman, Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Will Smith. They got a lot, man.
They got to get credit for that. I don't know that they get dinged for that.
Right,
like,
right.
You know, and that tells me what's really driving value. Is it pitching or is it hitting? Like, if you have this many pitching injuries and you're still in first place in the best division in baseball because your lineup is saving you every night, I think I'd rather build in the position of just shoring up position players, which seem to get hurt at least more reliable clip. Pitching, you have no idea what you're going to get. I remember the Yuri Perez, and I'm excited Yuri Perez is back, but in that year, there were good arguments to hold him back. And he still got hurt anyway from a very conservative overall approach. So you can get hurt when you go conservative because they didn't pitch him in the postseason. They could have used him. But then, like, if you just run a guy, that's the argument that they made for Sandy. Well, they let Sandy throw too many innings, therefore he eventually gets hurt. I'm on the side. Pitchers have shown in the past that they can throw 250 plus innings for stretches of time. I'm on the side of throwing more. Like, especially in the off season, especially between starts, I think we shouldn't get accustomed to just throwing like high intensity for short amount of time and then, like, you know, rest in between necessary. You have to have some rest, but you also have to keep throwing. And I deal with enough pitchers to feel like the guys who keep their throwing programs high intensity and like the guys who stay healthy aren't the guys who throw the least. I don't know what that means. I don't know where to scale that, but I see the guys that have maintained health as the guys who throw a lot and lift a lot, and they do a lot. So I don't think this is it doesn't feel like it's a volume thing, and I don't know that it's an intensity thing. I don't know what to make of this.
You look at Nolan Ryan. I mean, that's kind of like the classic example, right? As far as high volume, high octane as it gets, and you know, he was extremely durable. I've heard the argument. I want to say Adam Wainwright said that pitchers are building up their velocity at a young age, and then they learn to throw off speed when their arms are already tuned up. As opposed to some pitchers, they start throwing curveballs earlier before they build their velo up, and they know how to throw curveballs. I mean, I don't know how scientific that theory is, but I've heard that from a few pitchers that like to throw curveballs and had durability, that they say, you know, you can't just chase velocity. Now you're developing your breaking pitches as a fully grown flamethrower. So I don't know if that has anything to do with that, but it's just, we don't have the answers on this show. I know, because the Dodgers don't have the answers.
I think if you just grabbed a baseball and you just pressured it with your fingers, and then you just get into a slider grip and you kind of turn your hand, or you get into a splitter grip, you feel, and you have your hand on your elbow and your forearm, you feel that there are different motions. And so when you're ripping a breaking ball at high velocity, it's just a different strain. So I do think there's something to that. I just don't know that we figured out what that something is, because there are guys who go out and throw heavy percentage sliders for their whole career and maintain a high degree of health. And there are guys who throw primarily fastballs and get into trouble as well. So I do think we're throwing breaking balls at a higher volume with more, with more intensity and more willing to go to the breaking ball more often at a higher percentage. And so I do think higher breaking ball usage there's something there, but I can't directly correlate it to something, because guys threw a lot of breaking balls back in the day too. You know, it wasn't just a fastball dominant profile. But I think as we're maxing out pitch arsenals, we got sweepers, we got cutters, we got sliders, we got slurves. As we're like kind of working through all these things and maximizing those, there's a lot of reps that people don't see in the off seasons that could be adding to these injuries. A lot of tweaking that's happening to the arsenal. You're now changing your pitch grip. But a lot of guys change grips, and that, like I said, that example that I used, you know, some guys, the splitter for a long time, you didn't want a guy to throw a splitter because you were worried about how that affected his elbow. Some guys throw a splitter and they can immediately feel it tugging on their UCL or tugging on their elbow. And so, but now we got guys throwing huge splitter percentages.
Well,
you know?
one of them, we're talking about two UCLs, probably the best splitter in the game, I believe, at least when he's really rolling.
Right.
And
but I didn't answer your question on how they're going to use him, right? So
what are you going to see from him? What are we going to see from this guy?
I do think that there will be, because of what he represents offensively, which is a top 2, arguably number 1 player in his league in the game overall. Like, you have to be mindful that those contributions are important, but you also need the pitching, and he wants to. He's like, this isn't happening because the Dodgers are asking Shohei to pitch and he doesn't want to. This is clearly important to him, and he has the weight, the cachet, the capital to like, no, I'm a pitcher too.
He's the boss,
right? Like he's got agency in this, and so those conversations must be fascinating about how they do this. But you're not going to run him out there as a reliever unless you're in a postseason capacity and you feel good about where you are, because it's too unpredictable when you're going to get him into the game as a reliever, right? Too unpredictable what pocket you're going to need him in. Are you going to use him as a closer? Okay, but what about the games that you're losing? Sometimes you're losing a game, you think he's down, and then you could be in a spot where you need him. And I don't think you want to be unpredictably having to utilize that guy. So, but I also don't think you're going to count on him for 7 when he goes into a game. So it kind of puts you in this hybrid opener. The opener makes the most sense, where you can schedule when he's going to be in the game, right? Or you envision somebody opening for him, and then he's the piggyback for the middle of the game. That can possibly happen too. But my guess is that they're going to do some sort of opener capacity and see where it goes from there. But I think baseball is better when Ohtani's doing both. So I love watching this. I love seeing it, and to see him, the idea that we won't get Shohei Ohtani closing the game against Mike Trout in the World Baseball Classic, like, that's one of the better moments in all of baseball, period. And so I like that this is back. I'm not really on the conservative side of pitchers should be held back or thrown or withheld from games.
30 people live here. Like and subscribe. Nice. Get in the comments, man. Appreciate everybody. As a fan, you know, just how good he is mentally and how kind of a big moment guy he is. You kind of want him at the end of the game. But then the question is, just practically, and I don't know the answer, the ability to warm up to be a reliever when you're also the most important offensive player. Is that something that just as a practical matter becomes difficult from a timing standpoint? Like, how does that work, getting ready to come in the game as a closer when, you're the most important offensive player on the team?
I mean, any pitcher here would spotlight, and they all have different abilities to warm up and get hot for a game. Some guys will need to start their process to get hot as a reliever in the 3rd inning. All the mobility stuff, all the throwing, all the visualization, those kinds of things that like you can do because you're not in the game. Shohei is going to be locked into this game. So that's why the reliever feels really exceptionally difficult for him to appropriately get warm, appropriately get into a game. And then you're not in control of when you can use them because you don't know what games you're going to be in and out of. That's why I think as a starter, you get to plan on the front end. You get to front load your entire ramp up process, and if you come in behind anybody, you don't get control of that. And he's got to do this thing. What I'm interested in is if they're going to let him hit the days that he's pitching. I think that'll be an interesting marker for how this is going to be approached, because they're going to want that bat in the lineup every chance that they could get. But as a starter, is the only way you get to have control of the warm up, the ramp up in a way that you feel is safe, appropriate, and just tactful for a player of this caliber.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the Baseball Savant. I mean, it's hard to navigate because you got to pull him up as a pitcher. But, we're talking about a guy, this is his last season here. The actual stats were outstanding, but just going under the hood, breaking ball, 95th percentile, overall as a pitcher, 85th percentile, fastball velo, 88th percentile. I thought that'd actually be higher. The K percentage, 94th percentile. So, just whiff rate, 82nd percentile. So just an elite, and this is as a starter. So do you think we might see him today with all the adrenaline and everything else? Do you think he goes out there and throws a couple triple-digit pitches, or do you think he's more of a pitcher maybe? Not that he wasn't before, but even more of a, mid-90s kind of guy than we saw last time?
I think it's very hard for pitchers to be like throwing 85%, for example. So when you're out there and your intensity's ramped up, you're kind of like, it's really hard to have your governor stop at 85 and you don't maybe need to red line at 100, to where you're just like chasing velocity out there. But I think we're going to be seeing his baseline, to me, is high enough where we may very well see a a ramped up like Shohei Ohtani that maybe does hit triple digits. I wouldn't be surprised about that. But I also, it wouldn't surprise me to see something a tick below that, just because there's a progression. This isn't it's a progression into him being, having his feet under him. And it's only because he's hitting. If he was just a pitcher, maybe we wouldn't see him right now. But because he's on the roster active, like you're going to want to find a way to use him. And I think this is their progression to use him, to get to a postseason where maybe he's, going 7 for you on, starting and hitting that day too. So I wouldn't be surprised to see triple digits though, just because sometimes pitchers come back stronger because they haven't had to do all the things that a pitcher has to do on their TJ rehab. Like they get hurt. And so now maybe they have a deeper appreciation for the things that maybe got them hurt. Right. And I think that his rehab process will have been an elite level rehab process. But it's interesting because Tom House, I don't know if you know that name. He's one of the most recognized pitching coaches over the past
Tom Brady's
few
coach as well.
Right. And I think that's it. Tom House is connecting his hitting to his getting hurt on the pitching side of things. And I don't know that it's not that I don't buy that. He's got, decades of experience, but it's interesting that that's what he's spotlighting, that like his ability to do both is what's impacting his ability to pitch. Right. And, I don't know, man. He's such a strong physical outlier of a person that I wouldn't put anything past him at this point. I think he could come back and be Nolan Ryan on the mound and Shohei Ohtani at the plate. He might be one of those guys.
I think the craziest thing to me about Ohtani is if you go back to Babe Ruth, which you have to because that's the only comp. He was growing up. The reason Babe Ruth always kind of won every argument was, well, he was also an elite pitcher. But at that time, when people were throwing, I just looked it up, in 1920, the leader in innings, Pete Alexander, 363 innings, yep. Right? And, not a lot of rest. Guys were playing a lot. So at a time when people really pushed it, even then they said, hey, Babe Ruth, pick one. He didn't do it really at the same time for an extended period. So it's like what this guy's doing is so unusual, not only in this era where we're trying to protect the players, but even in the era where guys work themselves to death, durability wise. It was still too much for Babe Ruth to pitch and do what he does on offense. So think back to, when sports are at their peak. And I think baseball right now, my belief is baseball's at its absolute peak, at least in a long time. NBA had Magic and Bird, then later Jordan. NFL had Brady and Manning. We got two guys right now standing above everybody else. You have Aaron Judge, who is on pace for maybe the best WRC plus season, offensive season, however you want to slice it, ever, including the guy we just talked about with, Babe Ruth, Barry Bonds during the steroid era. I mean, you're talking about the highest levels. And then, of course, Ohtani now returning to pitching. So now you really start the debate because you have the pitching part thrown in. So let me ask you, if Ohtani can pitch, maybe not the amount of innings, but the amount of quality that he did when we last saw him, which was ace level.
Yep.
And his hitting is at the level it is now, which is even better than it was before, as good as it gets in any era except for this era living with Judge. Who is the best baseball player in the world right now?
I think Aaron Judge is the best offensive player in baseball, best offensive force in all of baseball. But I think Shohei Ohtani is the best baseball player our generation has ever seen, and maybe any generation has ever seen, total baseball player. It's hard to, and this is no disrespect to Aaron Judge, and I think this is it's a credit to your point about us watching the best baseball maybe in the history of baseball, best quality of baseball. I think we're just blessed to be watching this era. I think it's like Magic and Bird, this we'll remember this for a long time. But Shohei Ohtani is he's the unicorn of professional baseball over the past however many generations, maybe ever. Because what you just described him being able to do is, I don't know, we've never seen it. And we didn't even get to see it with Babe Ruth. Barely anybody did. So it's the most talented baseball player I think we've ever seen. But Aaron Judge might be the better offensive player today in this moment. So
going to Aaron Judge, we've seen big guys we've not seen big guys be able to hit as well as he has. We've talked about it before on the show, just those long levers. It's hard to get that together. Is it just a combination of the size, the ability to hit, and then the brains that is leading to these results? Like, what is causing this level of, I mean, we grew up in an era where there were big guys. Obviously, some of them were enhanced, but I mean, there were a lot of guys with size, with power that could hit, that could put the bat on the ball, that had bat speed, all that stuff. What's allowed Aaron Judge to be on another level from even those steroid era guys?
So many things. I don't know. There's no tool deficiency. There's no offensive deficiency. There's a little bit of a miss, right? If you needed to split hairs in terms of his profile, but I mean, top of the scale swing decisions, top of the scale, in my opinion, move to the baseball right now, and top of the scale power with an ability to find the barrel and know, like, everybody knows he's in the lineup. You still have to pitch to him every now and then, but his ability to also get on base unlocks everything for him. Ohtani too. Like, these guys are elite swing decision guys that it has to start there, right? If you know you're going to get pitched to a certain way, and you know that a certain pocket of pitches is what you can do damage on, and you know that pitchers are going to make mistakes, even the best of them, you still have to execute on that decision. So I think he makes some of the better swing decisions we've ever seen since Barry Bonds. And I think Aaron Judge is an ultimate case of player development happening into your big league career and well into he's getting better every year, which is absurd to think about. I get so, every time Aaron Judge comes up, he deserves all the credit. I think, like I said, I think he's the offensive force in all of baseball. And I think there's actually a gap between him and Shohei just offensively. We can make our distinctions, but he's just seemingly bulletproof offensively. And so, like, I think about James Rowson, like the hitting coach there. Like, I think they got a good tandem going in terms of, like, that. I have to give credit to the process that's also allowing him to get better and better at each step. Aaron deserves the lion's share of it, but, like, there's a process behind him that's also allowing him to keep moving the line to somewhere we've never seen it before. He may well have the best season in Major League history, best first half in Major League history now.
Yep.
Like, and that I think, to me, is a little more of a takes a tribe kind of performance than just isolating one person out. Although, like I said, he deserves the lion's share. But I think if you asked Aaron, he would be deferential on some of it himself as well.
One thing about him, and again, I don't think we've ever had this many people in the chat, so I appreciate everybody like and subscribe to the show. This is oversimplifying it. But I mean, I have to ask the question, and this might be a question for a baseball historian. You're one of those guys that knows, going back to the 1900s, but I can't remember a great player, even a good player, like an all-star player with his size. Like, I think he's the biggest good player there's ever been. He's 6'7", 280 pounds. I mean, I thought James Wood was big. He's 240. Yeah. Frank Thomas was 240, 250. I'm struggling, and you've seen a lot of guys. Yeah. He's a beast, I know, in the DR. I cannot think of a bigger player that actually was productive for a sustained period than this guy. I mean, is some of it just that there hasn't been a player this good that was 6'7", 280 pounds and also good at hitting the baseball?
Dave Winfield stands out. So Dave Winfield, I've actually, I've shaken his hand and met him a few times in person. When you're up on Dave Winfield, you're like, this is a massive human being. And I think that when you're scouting Aaron Judge, the comps that you have to reach to are guys like that, right? Like who else is in this category? But I think it falls off there. And I'm sure.
And they got him at 6'6", 220. Right. Now, this is a long time ago, so you don't know.
Correct.
If it's accurate. Plus, he's not in the weight room like he is. Also great. Sure. Wasn't he like a two-way guy, played other sports? I mean, in college, like just a freak athlete, Dave Winfield. But it's like, I knew Judge was big. We've seen Giancarlo Stanton here in Miami. We see some big players. I guess just seeing that 6'7", 280, I hadn't actually noticed that he was that heavy. I mean, we know he's heavy. We look at him.
Right.
But to be 40 pounds heavier than Frank Thomas, I mean, some of it's got to be just the pure size, along, of course, with the ability to hit. Yeah. Right. I mean, it's just not something we've ever seen.
Yeah. And I think that it's what gives him like that margin, that pure physicality, that sheer force generation on the baseball allows him to, I think, overcome like maybe a a ball you hit 80% well, that another guy has to square up and hit 100 for that ball to go out. You hit it 80, it's going to go. And so I think that's playing into this as well. Like if I can't imagine third baseman being told to like play infield in on Aaron Judge, like you're like, no, thanks kind of thing. Like some of the exit velocities that we've maybe never seen before. So I think he's another, I call Shohei Ohtani a unicorn. This guy is a unicorn in his own category, especially physically, like you're saying, because it's hard to be that big and work inside of a baseball. You have such long arms and like there's only so much space that you can create. And I think he deserves, he and everybody involved with his hitting process deserves credit for still finding a way to have a short move to the baseball, despite the length that your arms will inevitably be, because he doesn't look disproportional.
No,
he looks proportional,
looks
like a
great.
proportional human being, but he's 6'8", so his arms are extremely long. So the things he's had to do to create a short move to the baseball, despite those arm lengths, is to me astonishing. It's probably the most hitterish thing in baseball, even if it doesn't look super silky smooth. And it's funny because he makes a different move to the baseball than other guys, but I think he can make that move. It's more of a snap movement. I don't know if it's a taboo saying. There's a guy called Teacher that goes by Teacher Man. That's like a hitting, I don't want to say guru, but maybe like just a prominent voice in hitting.
Celebrity.
That Aaron Judge is most closely tied to that philosophy, but I don't think Aaron is just like a teacher man guy, but he's describing a snap move to the baseball that works for Aaron Judge. Now it's a different move to the ball than Mookie Betts makes to the baseball, for example, or than Shohei Ohtani makes to the baseball. But I think Judge and his support staff's ability to identify what move to the baseball works for him, capitalizing on his elite baseball decisions and elite swing decisions and 6'8", 280. Those three things, that's a perfect storm of elite production, and that's what we're seeing.
Going from one physical freak, really two physical freaks, to another, Denzel Clarke. And this is not a name that was on my radar. You're going to pull up the catch here. You're a center fielder, or all over the outfield. You grew up playing. I mean, we've seen Jim Edmonds make some plays. Obviously, Willie Mays back in the day. Kenny Lofton made some great plays growing up. We've seen some incredible ones. Andrew Jones made some plays look really easy. I think climbing up the hill, that was probably one of my favorite catches I've ever seen. But it's hard to say that there's been anything better than what we've seen here. Before we get into Denzel Clarke, because his physical profile is more unique than I realized. I mean, is that the best catch you've ever seen from Denzel Clarke?
I don't know. There's one that sticks in my head, and it's a Gary Matthews Jr. catch in center field playing for the Rangers. And the Ken Griffey Jr. like full split crashing into the fence. There's a few Jackie Bradley Jr. ones that are just absurd. But I mean, this is up there. This is up there in terms of what he does. Climbs up, like it's a hard, that center field in Anaheim is just like a tricky one to play. And so, shout out to him for jumping onto the scene and just becoming a sensation right away by making this catch that will now be remembered. It's probably the best catch I've seen in the last 3 to 4 years. Right. So best catch ever. I don't know that I put it in that category just yet. But as a former center fielder myself, like I have a deeper appreciation for center field play, and this one was awesome.
I'm curious from a sports science perspective, if you took, the fence and just put a ruler up, if it's not the highest that a ball has been when it went over the fence. Because I mean, he had a climb, number one. But then here's what I really digging into Clarke. 6'4", 220, playing center field. Mom was a heptathlete for Canada. He is Canadian. Clarke is, but his mom was a Canadian Olympian. So when you combine the athletic ability and then it's kind of like we talked about with Judge and Ohtani. I mean, this guy's unusually big for a center fielder. How many center fielders did you scout that were 6'4", 220? It's like a defensive end.
How many?
So it's like a bunch of physical things kind of colliding in one that allow him, plus, of course, the great timing and coordination to make a play like this that not everybody, I mean, if you're 6 foot and you're the best athlete in the world, you can't make that catch because you're not going to reach high enough, right? How many center fielders you scout that were 6'4", 220? I mean, it's like
not many, but
like,
when you see it, you get intrigued. You're like, oh man, and this guy could play center field, and he's 6'4" and this and that. I mean, we talked about not too long ago, we were talking about Jason Hayward, right? Like just being like a center field profile out of the draft. Those are the guys that get stuffed, I think, from a scout standpoint. So yeah, I think more physical is usually better, but you always got to be strong to play the game. So like you can be not that, like Corbin Carroll could play center field and like doesn't physically look like that, but the power output, like you'd be strong to play this game no matter what. But yes, if you're hedging, you're probably going to be hedging in the direction of physicality. And so when you can find physicality also at this premium position, you know, I usually lean on the side of that in my evaluations. And not just because they can get over the fence, but just because I think it just projects better. It's a sturdier projection to have bigger physical guys.
Yeah, look, I mean, Aaron Judge did play some center field, so we're talking about big center fielders. That's probably the top of the list all time just because he played that. But to make a catch like this, you think of a guy like maybe like an O'Neal Cruz, some of the guys that they've been putting out there, these freakazoids, you know, maybe they can make a play like this, but really outstanding, interesting profile. Again, I had not heard this name until he made this catch, but digging into his profile, he was a prospect, but the K rates were insane. I think they still are pretty high, 40% at times. But seems like just the power that he has, because he does have power when he connects, and then all the athletic stuff on defense is enough to carry you, even if you have some really big holes in your offensive profile.
I'd put a quote unquote on carry you. Like you can't carry a 40% K rate no matter how elite your defense is in a major league lineup. So like hopefully he stabilizes that component to be able to keep him there.
And that was the minors. I'm not sure it's that now.
But the swing and miss is a concern in this profile overall. Now his ability to control that gets him into the big leagues, but now you got to stay in the big leagues. And an elite defensive profile, even at center field, can't keep you in a lineup for an entire season with a 40% K rate or even a 35% K rate. It's hard. Like at a certain point, the team will need offense to come out of there. That's why I used to have a more defensive mindset in roster construction, only to like come around to the other side. It has to be defense. I'd rather have a 55 defender with a 50 bat than a 75 defender with a 30 bat at that position, if that makes sense.
Yep. So I did the quick math on the K rate here. 49% in the majors. So I said 40% of the minors over an extended period, only 21 games, but yeah, 49%. He's had 69 plate appearances, 34 strikeouts. So obviously that needs to get a little bit better. But here's how amazing is this. So the guy's played 21 games. His OPS is 515 with that crazy K rate. He still has 0.6 WAR.
Yeah.
Just because of the defense. I mean, it's amazing. Like you said, at that position, it makes up for a lot.
And what's important there is like if the A's for some reason get into the postseason, like in postseason play, that stuff gets magnified. You can see those guys take over some games defensively, but that will not be a sustainable K rate to be able to keep a 26-man active spot on a contending team. Now, you might have some more space if you're out of it and contending, so you're letting this guy work through some of those developmental issues. But 40% K rates, they crush a guy's confidence. Like you can be an elite defender all you want. You're going to lose a lot of confidence striking out 35 to 40%.
We'll see how it goes with Mr. Clarke. There's a lot of fun baseball to watch. We will be tuned into Ohtani. Plenty more happening this week. Next Monday, we will be right here. El Big League Show. Best numbers we've had on the live chat. Like and subscribe to the show. Appreciate everybody's comments. We'll see you next week.